Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to From the Newsroom. I'm your host, Caleb Hoggard. Due to the ongoing crisis in East Palestine, Ohio, we at From the Newsroom wanted to explore what emergency management looked like in Cape County. Reporter Koki Lynn has more on the story.
The SEMO Port Railroad, running from St. Louis, Missouri to Memphis, Tennessee, this train track runs through Cape Girardeau. For residents of the area, the sound of its whistle is all too recognizable, and the worst that can be said about it is that it disrupts sleep and study. But in East Palestine, Ohio, a train derailment was an all-too-real nightmare. We spoke with Director of the Emergency Management, Mark Winkler, and Deputy Director Sam Herndon about what that could look like for residents of Cape Girardeau and what they can do to mitigate damage in the future.
It's an unfortunate situation for them, but it's fortunate for us to where we can kind of see how they respond, learn from things that they're doing, say, hey, that's a great idea, hey, maybe that would have worked different, if they tried something else. A year and a half, 2 years ago, we kind of really broke down and looked at the equipment that we had. We were fortunate that we had quite a bit of equipment that had been purchased in the early 2000s, and that's kind of where it went. It wasn't maintained, it wasn't updated. So we really kind of shifted our focus more towards training and equipment. And in the last year and a half, we have doubled the amount of training equipment that we have in our area. And we're looking at over the next 2 years to double that again, to give us the ability for the 8 counties to be able to have the training equipment that they need to be able to be prepared for any hazmat incidents that come along.
Herndon said that while training is one part, having the support to make the necessary changes is another part of preparing emergency response for disaster. Equipment, however, is not the only thing that goes into preparation for an emergency situation. Knowing how and when to use the right equipment can only be done in training, something that Cape Girardeau County is making strides towards creating.
The county has not had a full-scale exercise in probably 15 years. We began back in August. We started looking at it after the I-57 incident down by Charleston with the fog and the multi-car crash. And we started looking at that response. And it was like, we need to be prepared for that in Cape Girardeau County. We can use this as a good stepping stone to look at, not necessarily to critique what happened there, but to use that similar incident to look at ourselves and say, hey, we need to simulate this same type of incident and see how we would respond.
While emergency situations are handled primarily by emergency response, Winkler said there is one major way in which members of the community can aid their efforts and prevent further disaster after the fact.
Help out. Help the community out. You can volunteer in so many ways. I mean, lift water off of a semi-trailer to, be moved to the next location where people need water. We can always use volunteers.
While the situation in Ohio is rare, being prepared for if or when it could happen is a major part of the effort of emergency management. For The Arrow, I'm Koki Lynn.
Thank you, Koki. Be sure to check in later this week to read the full article by Lizzie Stock on the Arrow's website. Now it's time for everyone's favorite segment with everyone's favorite co-host. Here's Nathan Gladden with this week's Weekly Roundup.
Welcome back to the Weekly Roundup, where we recap some of the most prevalent news stories taking place on and off campus. This week, reporter Kate Hausman debunked the two sides myth of the brain. It is widely believed that the brain is broken into two hemispheres, one side being logistical and the other side being creative. Something that is, quote, right for your brain is art therapy and a good sleep schedule. For more on the story, Hausman's article will be linked in the description below. The SEMO Redhawks football team added a new addition to their coaching staff. Defensive line coach Kevon Beckwith is coming from the University of Incarnate Word. When asked why he joined SEMO, Beckwith said the leadership the team chose and the total buy-in from the community were a couple of reasons why. To learn more, check out Maddox Murphy's story in the description. Are you looking to add some new songs to your Spotify or Apple Music playlists? Well, we asked the crew of From the Newsroom what songs should be added to your playlist, and Koki Lynn says Devil Like Me by Rainbow Kitten Surprise. Caleb Hoggard says 1 AM Freestyle by Joji, and my recommendation is Oh Caroline by the 1975. Thank you for joining me on this week's rendition of the Weekly Roundup. I'm Nathan Gladden. Back to you, Caleb.
Thank you, Nathan. He's so elegant with his words. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of From the Newsroom. As always, be sure to tune in next week as we'll dive deeper into more news you need to know about. As always, I'm Caleb Hoggard. Good night, Cape Girardeau.